Hi, and welcome to Oakville Matters. Our city calls itself a town and feels like a village when you meet each other halfway. And we work together to grow our harmony, safety, and prosperity for everyone. Today, the question we want to answer on this show is what is the state of housing in Halton and in Oakville? As you know, Oakville is a major partner in an upper tier municipality known as the Region of Halton. And today we're joined by Halton Region's Commissioner of Social and Community Services, Alex Sarchuk. And we're also joined by Halton Region's Director of Housing Services, and he happens to be the Chief Operating Officer for the Halton Community Housing Corporation. And that gives us the context for today's conversation because the annual State of Housing report is out, and it covers housing from new market housing to social assistance housing. If I don't misdescribe the spectrum, Alex, is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, great to be here. That's exactly it. The State of Housing report does speak to a wide range, including market housing that many people would be familiar with, whether that's a rental or ownership. But it also speaks to really the government-assisted side of housing, which is both can include emergency shelter supportive housing and social housing for low-income households.
So this is one of my favorite annual reports because it gets to where we live, all of us, and we have a common spirit in Halton that everybody's on board and we don't leave people behind. I'm usually really proud of this report because for the last few years, it's showed us hitting our targets and meeting our challenges. And like the headline the other day was that we missed our targets. And I think buried down in the story somewhere, it mentioned that it was the first year, quite a few. So how do you feel about the report? And where are we going to go? How are we going to get back on track?
Yeah, I'd be happy to kick us off, Mr. Mayor. So yes, certainly Halton Region, town of Oakville, like many other jurisdictions in Ontario, if not across the country, are facing really, an unprecedented housing situation. Market conditions for ownership or even private rental are extremely expensive, and even compared to household income, there continues to be a growing affordability gap in many communities. And I think the State of Housing report, when it speaks to those market conditions, is reflecting that general trend. I think, it would be fair to say that Halton Region compares favorably to neighboring jurisdictions across the GTHA that have similar market conditions. But that's not really, for me, a satisfactory response, and we continue to try to make inroads to strengthen the overall community's approach to providing and establishing affordable market and rental housing. But importantly, and I know we'll speak about it today, but for those individuals who by virtue of low income really have no ability to enter the private market, there does need to be government supported housing. And I know we'll touch on some of those elements in today's conversation.
Well, right. This is the challenge is bigger than ever. Let's see, we're at a time of economic and housing supply crisis. And we are on the eve of the widening of the floodgates of new residents of Canada. And so we do have, it was already a steep hill that we got to climb, but I think the incline's going to get steeper as the new immigration levels start to hit. And the irony is that we desperately need them because we don't have enough productive. I mean, with so many old people, and I think I'm the only one here who resembles an old person. But there's so many aging people. We need more productive workers if we're going to keep our pensions alive, and if we're going to, be able to have the life we want for the retired people and so on. So. There's a new report by Dr. Mike Moffat, Prosperity Institute, pointing out that a lot of cities are behind on their progress meeting their housing pledges. In fact, they single out Burlington, for one, for being way behind. Mercifully, I looked carefully. They had a yellow zone at the bottom where they had the not performing crowd, and then the white zone up above. And oh my goodness, was I relieved to see Oakville right there in the middle. So we're not the bad boy this time. So in the let's start right off with homelessness. It's a topic of some currency. We've had several notable cases of homelessness in Oakville and I believe in Halton. And I think the average person might take some comfort from, it's not like the big encampments that we've read about in Waterloo and Hamilton and Toronto and even Mississauga. I'm thinking that our incidence is a little bit lower, and I'm aware of some efforts that you and Andrew have been doing around making it easier for people to accept shelter. I'm familiar personally with how some people believe, and they do have a right to choose to be living outdoors, and yet, why don't you talk about some of the ways that you've made it easier for people to accept shelter?
Absolutely. Well, I'd say Halton Region, with the very active support of Halton Regional Council, has taken a position that we want to be extremely aggressive in supporting individuals who are at risk of becoming homeless, or if they find themselves in that circumstance. It's really not acceptable, I would say, in our community for individuals to experience homelessness, and we take a very aggressive approach to providing adequate supportive services that meet individuals' needs. That said, people do find themselves in this situation, and we do operate two key facilities, one in Oakville that is a shelter for single men, and a family, couple, and children's shelter in Burlington. And unfortunately, we do see numbers. I can just very, very quickly, in 2022, our emergency shelter system provided support to 72 single women, 307 single men, and 67 families. That's far, far too much, but I think we compare favorably to other communities that you alluded to, Mr. Mayor, that are dealing with significant numbers of unsheltered individuals, and sometimes the term encampments, which is just a cluster of individuals sleeping rough, as we sometimes say, tents or makeshift shelters. These are not safe environments. These are not healthy environments, and we certainly actively and strongly encourage individuals in those circumstances to take advantage of our programming. We can provide not only a roof over your head and a warm bed, but meals, access to public health resources, support for individuals who are experiencing active addictions, and a pathway to more secure and safe long-term housing. So the region, through a number of contracted third parties, makes that very, very active offer. If we are aware or alerted to individuals sleeping outside, we do make visits and outline the services that are available to individuals. And unfortunately, some individuals do have reticence to accepting shelter services. They have perhaps had bad experiences in their lives. They've had trauma in their lives. They prefer the quote unquote independence and freedom of being out on their own. But again, we try to lower any barriers, perceived or otherwise, to coming into our care. So, for example, some folks may have a pet and they prefer not to relinquish their pet. So we do make arrangements for pets to be, well cared for, and individuals can have access to them. Similarly, couples, perhaps in some jurisdictions, have had to separate in order to go to a gender-specific shelter system. We're able to accommodate couples of same-sex couples or alternate gender couples very adequately. And We think that's part of the reason why people are accepting of our supports, and that we bring I would venture to say, a high degree of compassion and familiarity with the needs of these individuals. And again, shelter is a short-term solution, and Andrew could speak further about the work that we do to create a pathway to long-term sustainable housing for these individuals, because that is the goal. That is what we aspire to. People entering in and out of the shelter system is not a suitable response.
Sure. Before we go there, though, there's a little element in this that the average member of the public may not be aware of, and that's this, the courts finding that people are free, they have a human right, in fact, to sleep rough and to camp out in public space. That's always for some people, a bit of a shock.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are other people who they sync up with that freedom, and they kind of I was going to say actively, but I need a stronger word. They aggressively choose to exercise that right, and in those cases, I guess we find ourselves unable to do much except say, we'll check back later and see if you need some help.
Yeah, absolutely, Mr. Mayor. I think there is an emerging body of jurisprudence and court decisions that positions the agency that individuals have to decline the supports that a municipality may provide and may choose to sleep outside or be outside. Obviously, if it's on private property, that's a different thing. But when we're talking about municipal property, and that often includes park or vacant lands, et cetera, it's a little trickier, in all honesty. And the Waterloo Court decision did say that there are some limitations on how aggressive municipalities can be to, quote unquote, clear encampments, to forcibly remove individuals, and that a more human rights-based approach is more appropriate. And that speaks to some of the elements that I mentioned earlier, which is providing the right sort of information to individuals so that they understand the supports that they can receive, that we listen to people with lived experience as we design and develop our programming so that it truly meets needs, and that individuals feel there is really a non-judgmental and non-discriminatory element to the services that they receive. And we believe in Halton Region, we've come a long way in terms of modifying some of our programs to achieve that and lower barriers. And I do think we have relative success in bringing people into our services, and again, ideally transitioning them to long-term housing.
So I think, I agree with your assessment, although I think to the degree that we're better than others, we're also luckier than others. I think favored by Lady Luck here. But Andrew, let's talk about the actual changes on the ground, and where we really should go with our conversation now is how are we dealing with the shortfall in assisted housing? What are our chances of getting on track there?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the question. Yeah, I mean, I would say with council's support, we've been able to address the need for growing assisted housing. The report did say that we were down this year, but it also said that had it not been for the large, sizable investments made by regional council into assisted housing, the number would have been larger. So I can tell you, for example, that regional council in November 2021 approved a multi-year strategy to create new assisted housing in support of the comprehensive housing strategy. A target was set of 550 to 900 new housing opportunities between 2014 and 2024. With council's strong support, we exceeded that in 2020, creating over that amount. And council felt impassioned to do more. So it approved what we call the portfolio approach to create new units and set a target of 600 by 2031. Units are created through 3 streams of activity. We partner with nonprofits, cooperatives, and private sector developers and municipalities to create new units. We've done a land inventory of regional and Halton Community Housing Corporation sites for potential development purposes. And we've also set a strategy of acquiring land, units, and buildings for assisted housing purposes. And, we've made tremendous progress, and we continue to be aggressive and opportunistic. And I'll say that in 2023, for example, already council has approved 3 projects and growing. So 263 Kerr Street in Oakville, the site of the former Oakville Senior Center, is going to be developed into 52 units of supportive housing for seniors. And on the ground floor, it will include a community hub space where a number of social service and health supports can be provided, not only to the residents of that building, but to surrounding community. We've created 14 additional supportive housing units at 1258 Rebecca Street, which are going to house seniors that require supports. And more recently, Regional Council approved 12 additional units at 17 Guelph Street in Halton Hills, which is going to house women in poverty with children and seniors. But there's more to come. Council also approved some pre-development work to be done at Margaret Drive, 363 Margaret Drive in Oakville, which we're anticipating is going to create 13 family units in a much-needed area of Oakville. So, I think we're being as aggressive and opportunistic as possible to create as many units to meet the growing need.
So how do you get the data to be able to anticipate anticipating need and getting in place to, it's like throwing the ball and then running and catching it. How do you do that?
We spent some considerable time, Mr. Mayor, looking at a number of data sources. So we use the State of Housing Report. Obviously, that uses Bank of Canada information, uses CMHC data, Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation data, and Statistics Canada data. But we also look at our homelessness enumeration. We look at waitlist data, and we've actually designed a policy tool which allows us to look at a range of housing opportunities side by side and make informed decisions. So we know, for example, which communities have the highest need, how many people are in core housing need in sub-communities of each municipality, and what kind of tenure is used and what kind of housing form. Do we need seniors units? So, for example, we know that seniors, the highest demand for seniors is 1-bedroom units. For families, it's 3- and 4-bedroom units. And we have a sense of how many people are in core housing need, how many people are paying more than 30% of their income in rent, those kind of metrics. We bring those together and we run them through a relatively robust model that allows us to prioritize investments into those communities that most need it.
Okay, so one of the things that we need a lot of is rental, and the report emphasizes this. How are we doing on that, and what steps can we take there?
With respect to more rental, I think we still have a low vacancy rate. We know that CMHC says that a good vacancy rate is 3% for a viable marketplace. We're significantly below there, but we need to create more. And I think we understand that using planning tools and policy tools, we can create more units. One of the things, and preservation of existing stock is also important. So one of the things that Oakville did was the new rental bylaw, which is going to preserve some of the rental stock that's already in place. But I know that the region has required that through a State of Housing Report that 65% of all new units be multi-residential or townhome. Why? Because we know that those forms of housing are generally more affordable to folks on a fixed income. And I think we hear a lot from families who say, where will my children live? The appreciating cost of housing is becoming untenable for many. So by changing the form of housing and doing more multi-res and townhomes, it does create some degree of affordability that, families may be priced out of semi-detached, detached homes, can't afford those, but it could put them in the marketplace.
Yeah. Well, I have a little lived experience myself, and I like to remind young people that I was 35 before I could afford to buy my first house. And as I recall, the mortgage was, the interest rate was 17.25%. So every generation seems to have challenges. Every generation. So you covered off that we need to shift to higher density because it's more affordable. And I'm interested in that information seeking part still. We've got a whole bunch of very good private sector charities or agencies that we work with, I know. And I've always thought it's interesting. We depend on them for information to a degree, and they depend on us for information to a degree. And I'm proud of that interchange. I assume that they're an important element or source for this report as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in, Mr. Mayor. Absolutely, the region maintains active and I'd say very strong working relationships with the housing development community, whether that's private interests or not-for-profit agencies who work in this space. We, with some regularity, formally issue requests for expressions of interest so that we can enter into dialogue with proponents. Sometimes we use other procurement vehicles like more formal requests for proposals. And over the last number of years, we've entered into numerous agreements with these third parties who are developing housing, whether that's for some units within a larger build or whether that's a build specific to our specifications and with some investment of government funding. I would say the region is also very aggressive in its advocacy to both the federal and provincial governments who have significant responsibilities associated with assisted housing. And we have had some success in receiving significant investments. Andrew alluded to the project at 263 Kerr Street, where we've seen an investment of federal and provincial dollars. So that's part of the equation. Our role is, as Andrew said, is to identify where some of the needs are in the community, to advocate to the other levels of government for investment in Halton region, and then to either develop on our own or to enter into these third-party partnerships to get housing built quickly.
Well, I know that it's my impression that the province has been bearing closer to its fair share of the burden financially with us. And it's been my abiding perception that the federal government has not really lived up to our standard or to they haven't met our level. I don't think they're doing their part, I guess is the unvarnished way to say it. And I do remember confronting the housing minister with that perception a little while ago, and he admitted it and said that if we would batch our proposals into this portfolio method, that we'd do better. And we did get some money, but we did not get the proper share from him. And when I confronted him about that afterwards, he said, "Well, there was more demand than I anticipated," and so implicitly he admitted that he'd shorted us again. So to a degree, I think it's a miracle that we do as much as we can when one of the partners isn't really playing with the same spirit that the province and the region and the local municipalities play with. I'm not sure if I don't know what's going to happen with this rumored cabinet shuffle, but since we went from not very much to about half of what they should be giving us, I don't know whether to pray that he's replaced or kept, because you could say, well, we went from hardly any to halfway. Maybe we should keep him. Maybe we'll get somewhere. What's your prospects on that front?
Well, we might like to take another crack at Minister Hussain, because at minimum we're trending in the right direction, Mr. Mayor. But you're right. I mean, I think the overall three-level of government funding construct for government-assisted housing has changed in previous years. And we're going back a bit. The region received essentially an allocation, and we had some flexibility to direct it to projects that produced housing. Now it is more of an apply and compete against other jurisdictions, quite honestly, across Canada. Andrew alluded to the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, which is the federal government's instrument to direct funding for housing. And they have numerous programs, and they continue to modify and change them because, quite frankly, in my opinion, they haven't been successful in achieving the overall national housing strategy. And we're fortunate here, Mr. Mayor, that yourself and other leadership in Halton region have been strong advocates. And as you suggested, we have seen some dollars that we are turning into viable projects and shovels in the ground. I think that's one of our strengths, is if money comes here, we will spend it effectively and we will create housing quickly.
Yeah, and not only that, but we pony up our share. Normally, I think we would be regarded as a good partner. So it's sad to me that asking nicely doesn't work and complaining loudly does seem to get you somewhere. Maybe there's a lesson in there somewhere, but it's nothing that I enjoy. So as we go forward now, and we've only got about a minute left, it looks to me like on the new market housing, at least in the eastern side of Halton, we are we're keeping up, if not overachieving. On the western side, there's some problem, but I'm sure that they'll get at and they'll solve. Across the north, it looks to me like things are going pretty well in terms of housing supply. I do have a degree in economics, so when the economist, Dr. Moffat, talks about this, I don't think he's crazy when he says, if you want prices to go down, you got to get the supply way up. And that's certainly what's going on, or that's the plan anyway. What's your sense of what next year's the state of housing report is going to say? Like in the budget that we're about to wrestle with at the region, are you well enough represented that do you need more?
Well, I'm kind of conditioned, Mr. Mayor, to always say we can take a bit more and achieve more. But to be fair, I'd say Regional Council has been very thoughtful in addressing these issues, whether it's our homelessness prevention and emergency shelter side of things, whether it's our development of government-assisted housing, and then, as Andrew alluded to, some of the policy instruments that, in all honesty, fall more to town of Oakville, city of Burlington, et cetera, related to market conditions. And that's perhaps the trickiest part, that there are significant market forces that are, I think it's fair to say, beyond the span of control of any single municipality, particularly in the GTHA.
Well, our time is beyond our span of control too, because we've just run out. Thank you very much for the time you gave us today, and thank you for watching. I hope you'll join us next time on Oakville Matters.